podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur.
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens. Le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida Tibi. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast, and thanks everyone for watching on this Wednesday, July 10 on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Twitter Live. Very much appreciated. The Sick Podcast, of course, brought to you in part by Energy Transportation Group. And Energy Transportation Group has once again been recognized as one of Canada's top fleet employers for the 4th consecutive year. This prestigious accolade underscores their steadfast dedication to fostering a workplace of excellence and opportunity, much in part to their exceptional team for their unwavering commitment and contribution. Energy Transportation Group is a top fleet employer. Also brought to you in part by Bittt Tibi. They launched their new Ultra Lager. It's a refreshing, thirst-quenching beer, perfect for the hot summer days with only 90 calories, 2 grams of carbs, 4% ABV per can, available in a pack of 6 and 12 in grocery stores all around the province of Quebec. Ultra light, ultra refreshing. As a matter of fact, a buddy of mine, Joe, came over yesterday as he's helping me out. Every time something's broken in my house, I call Joe and he fixes it, even though it's not his job. He's just a buddy of mine, but that's what you call a friend, a real good friend. And he came over and I said, Joe, I want to offer you a beer. And I said, this is 90 calories, 2 grams of carbs. And he said, what? And I said, yeah. And I gave Joe 6 of them, a 6-pack, as a matter of fact. And Joe is a very happy camper. And so am I, because, my house got repaired. So everyone wins. All right. Also brought to you in part by Playground. Play lucky numbers at Playground. Earn your entries daily and return every Sunday for a chance to win a share of the $15,000 in cash prizes with a $5,000 top prize. And on July 28, one lucky winner will take home $10,000 at the $30,000 finale. Visit playground.ca for details. I'm very happy to welcome to the program, of course, a regular collaborator on Wednesdays, and that is Craig Button from TSN. He's a hockey analyst, of course, and their director of scouting. How are you?
I'm great. We could have used some La Bittt Tibi in hot Vegas.
Yeah.
My mouth was thinking about, like, you go, it's refreshing. It's everything you want in a beer when it's hot outside. Well, it couldn't have got any hotter than when we were in Vegas, Tony.
My guy, I got to tell you, it was my first time in Vegas, Craig. Actually, it was my first time, and I absolutely loved it. It was beautiful. I don't think I'll ever go again. At the end of June, because as you know, it was 40, 41, 42, 43. It was hot. It was suffocating. It's dry, yes, but it was very hot. So you can't walk around all that much. And as beautiful as Vegas is, my advice as someone who went for the first time a couple of weeks ago would be go in and get out as fast as you can, because the longer you stay there, it's going to leave a little bit of a dent in the wallet. And I got there on late on the Tuesday night, and of course I was there until Sunday night and took the red eye out. So it left a little bit of a dent. Thank you very much. Craig, I got you've been so busy, of course, with the draft and stuff, but I don't want to put the draft on the back burner. Actually, I'll talk to you about the draft next week, okay? But the reason I'm not going to talk to you about the draft right now, and I want to talk to you about something else, is that last year, the Montreal Canadiens pulled a trade on draft weekend, and they acquired on draft day, and they acquired Alex Newhook, or the day before the draft. The year before that, they did the same thing with Kirby Dach on the night of the draft. It was announced. And this year, a lot of people, and I would be willing to bet that probably Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes themselves expected to be able to pull off a trade on draft night or draft weekend, and they didn't. As a matter of fact, Kent Hughes was asked at the end of round 1 on Friday night, Do you have anything brewing? Is it possible that we could see a trade here in day 2 by the Montreal Canadiens? And he said, yeah, we got things brewing, and yeah, it's possible, but it doesn't mean it's going to materialize. So we'll monitor it. We'll see how it goes. And ultimately, it didn't go anywhere. It doesn't mean that there won't be a trade that'll be announced the next day or 2 or 3. But so as a guy who was a former GM in the National Hockey League, and with all your experience, explain to me what's going on right now. If you have a plan and you weren't able to execute on your plan, let's just say the Canadiens had a plan to make a trade. It didn't have to be on draft weekend, but they probably thought chances are that's when it's going to happen, because that's when the most deals take place, and it doesn't happen. What's the thinking right now?
What I think happens, and keep in mind, there's a compressed schedule. End of the playoffs. Game 7 is on Monday, June 24th. Friday, we have the draft. Monday, we have free agency. So there's a lot going on. Teams are getting prepared for the draft. And certainly there's a lot of talks going on. And what ends up happening, I think we saw it with just in a brief moment when the Philadelphia Flyers traded from 12 back to 13. There was a lot of talk that Rutger McGroarty, the Winnipeg Jets first rounder from 2 years ago, was going to go to Minnesota. But all of a sudden, a player that Minnesota didn't expect to be there at 12, Zibuliam, they make a trade with the Philadelphia Flyers. So Minnesota moves up 1, Flyers move back 1. But it was all around Rucker McGroarty, and certainly Zibuliam, who the Minnesota Wild coveted, said, no, this is our guy. We're not going to make that trade. The reason I point that one out as just kind of a microcosm is that's kind of the discussion that goes on into the draft. Teams are waiting. They're saying, okay, maybe our guy is there. Maybe we can move up. A lot of the trades at the draft are built on the draft. So when Kirby Dach was traded from Chicago to Montreal, that was about the draft. When Alex Newhook got traded from Colorado to Montreal, that was about the draft. Now the draft passes. And these conversations have been going on, and there's been lots of them by all teams. Now you got 2 days, and you're going, okay, we want to see what free agency can offer us. And I think right now where the NHL teams are at is kind of this deep exhale. Okay, we know we know the draft is passed. We know what our rosters look like. We know what we did or what we were able to do and maybe not able to do in free agency. So now everybody takes a step back, but these conversations are still on the front burner. That they haven't stepped away, and now teams are trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to allocate our money? Keep in mind, there's contracts that are coming up. Like when I say contracts, I'm talking about contracts that can be extended. Caden Gooley comes to mind. So teams now are trying to manage ahead of year to understand what they can get. Other teams are offering up players knowing that, yeah, we might not want to pay that player that money next year. So all of these machinations are going on behind the scenes. And I think just because it was so compressed that maybe our expectations were a little bit high going into the draft, but I wasn't surprised that there wasn't a lot of what I would call player movement. But I think that now in the days ahead, the weeks ahead, that we'll see movement. We'll see movement as teams recalibrate and understand, what they want to do to round out their rosters and in a lot of cases make material changes to their rosters.
All right. Okay. So the names you talked about, Rutger McGroarty, Martin Necas's name has been out there for quite some time. Trevor Zegras' name has been out there for quite some time. Usually when a player's name is out there for quite some time, they're moved. Why do you think they weren't moved or haven't been moved up until now?
I think part of it is that trying to find what you would call fair value back. I mean, the Carolina Hurricanes know they have a really good player in Martin Necas. What do teams do when they hear Martin Necas what might want to be moved out of Carolina? What they do is they all phone Carolina. Hey, and then they're offering usually something that's a lot less than the value. And the Carolina Hurricanes know the value of Martin Necas. Patty Verbeek last year with Trevor Zegras, his name was out there a lot. He also knows that right now the value that teams may be prepared to pay for Trevor Zegras is on the low end. So so Patty Verbeek says, well, we got to get Trevor Zegras back to playing to the level he's capable of. Whether we want to trade him or not, it's not reflective of what he is as a player. So whether he can help us, whether we want to move him, and a team wants. That's how you get value. The interesting thing with Martin Necas, which I found very interesting, was that he filed for arbitration, which takes him out of any type of offer sheet. Because there was a lot of talk about maybe somebody would offer sheet Martin Necas. But the minute he filed for arbitration, now that speculation about a potential offer sheet, which I always think is speculation, is gone. But it doesn't mean just because there wasn't a move at the draft. I think a lot of it was predicated on, okay, Carolina Hurricanes, we got a really good player. If you want him, you better pay up. I think Trevor Zegras was very similar. If you want him, you better pay up. But teams weren't ready to pay up. Now it's and the uncertainty of arbitration in Necas's case factors in. How much is he going to make? Like, you know, he can get a short-term deal. He can't get a long-term deal. Like, so a team might want to be able to talk to them and say, hey, listen, we're interested, but we need to talk to them about a long-term deal. That means talking to the agent, understanding what, because all of a sudden if Martin Necas comes in and says, hey, I want 8.5 times 8, the team is going, oh, I'm not so sure about that. And trying to understand what the Carolina Hurricanes are asking for in return, that's part of the calculation in trying to make a trade. I agree with you, Tony. I think that when you start to hear names, it becomes whether it takes a short period of time or whether it takes a little bit longer, I think that these players end up moving ultimately.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. You know, it's funny because, and by the way, I had a great guest. I mean, I think all my guests are great, but it was the first time he was ever on the Sick podcast. And that was Alan Shenker, who joined me last night. Of course, a former scout with the Anaheim Ducks for about 20 years and was their chief scout down the stretch. And I asked him about Zegras. And it's funny, he said to me that he's not so sure that the Ducks want to trade Zegras. And that was like a little bit of a curveball. I said, what do you mean? Like, his name's been out there for the longest time. And he says, yeah, well, his name's been out there because they have a lot of players and they have a lot of forwards, and you know, they had acquired Cutter Gauthier, and everyone knows the players that they already have, but I'm not so sure they want to trade him. And that surprised me because I still think he's going to get traded, but much respect to Alain, of course, and his opinions. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm a big Alan Shenker fan, and I remember when he was a coach before he became a scout. And
so, oh, really? Eh?
Oh, yeah, wonderful person. Really is really sharp.
He's a great man. He's a great man.
Yeah, really sharp. But I think that's what happened last year. I think Pat Verbeek, you know, took the handbrake and started to pull on it. He said, wait a second here. Do we really want to continue up at this speed of maybe trading Trevor Zegras? Pat Verbeek has been on a lot of good teams as a player, and he obviously with Tampa Bay and then in management, and then over in Detroit. He knows that finding high-end talent is the hardest thing to do. And, okay, if I'm going to trade Trevor Zegras, I better be able to get a good return. I can't just trade Trevor Zegras because he's not performing for us. Because, again, how a player is performing at a particular point in time is also going to be reflected in the trade offers you're getting back for him. And Pat says, wait, and keep in mind, Pat's watched Trevor Zegras. He's watched Trevor Zegras from the time he was 16 through his college career into his early NHL career. It's not like Patty just woke up and goes, well, tell me about this Trevor Zegras. He's seen Trevor Zegras perform at an elite level. So now he steps back and goes, hang on here a second. I bet we trades happen all the time. Good players get traded. But if a player's value is down for different reasons, you got to be really careful about trading that player, because at some point in the future, it's going to reflect back that you didn't get appropriate value back for a player of that skill. And I think that's what Patty's recognized. And Patty has a lot of managerial experience. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why he's pulling on the handbrake right now.
All right. Rucker McGroarty, you brought him up. What can you tell us? I mean, how much would you be willing to give up for a player who we're hearing has a lot of talent? How much talent does he have? What's his worth on the marketplace, in your opinion?
I really like the way Rutger McGroarty plays. I think he's invested in the real challenging, hard parts of the game. He's a leader. He's a player and a person that says, hey, follow me. And it's not about him telling you to follow. It's just like he's going to show you the way. And he's a terrific young man. I don't know what's happened in Winnipeg, but at this time, I'll talk about him as a player and as a person. Like I said, I really like him. I think that he's got leadership oozing out of all of his pores. I think that he's the type of player that can play in different parts of your lineup. I don't think he's a top line player, but he's a player that's a difference maker. He's a player that finds a way to make a difference in so many different ways. Net front, in the corners, physically. He's smart. He can play with good players. He's big. He's willing to be a physical player. You know, it's interesting that you asked me this question today, because I've had a lot of people ask me the question. Please help me understand, Craig, how a team can draft a player 9th overall and then trade him for a third-line center. And I'm talking about the Matt Savoy trade. Like if somebody said to you at the draft, let's go back to the draft and said, I'll trade our 9th overall pick for a third-line center and Ryan McLeod. Like you'd go, no way. So, I mean, that's puzzling to me. So the value for Rutger McGroarty, I think, is high, as it should be. I think he's a player because he's 20 years old. I think he's ready to turn pro if he wants to. He's physically mature. He's mentally mature. And I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, geez, you know, what's happened? You know, why would you want that player? Well, I'll tell you why you want that player. You want that player because he's good. And I've heard it for a long time, whether it be Eric Lindros, who said I wasn't going to go. Let's not forget, Mayor Lemieux, and I'm not suggesting, in 1984 wouldn't go to the Pittsburgh Penguins draft table because he said they were. So this has happened. Eric Lindros said no, and this isn't something that
different reasons, of course. But yeah.
And so I can't speak to Rutger, but I think, like, obviously the Minnesota Wild were ready to trade the 13th pick in the draft for Rucker McGroarty. So I think that So
you wouldn't be worried then, like some of these red flags that, you know, here we have a young player coming in and already he's not happy with his new club and he wants out because of XYZ reason. This is not something that would scare you personally, because like you just said, you brought up examples of superstars like Mario Lemieux and Eric Lindros, who at the beginning didn't want to sign with their teams either, or it would scare you.
No, like, I mean, if you know the player and you try to understand, it didn't scare the Anaheim Ducks for trading for Cutter Gauthier. I mean, again, talent players, good players, they're not in abundance. It's hard to find them. I'll share a quick story with you about Eric Lindros. Bob Clark was our manager in Minnesota when Eric Lindros in the 1991 draft said he wasn't was not going to Quebec. He said, I'm not going to Quebec. Okay. So Bob Clark, you know, he didn't really look favorably on it. He says, I don't think it's right. You know, I think where you're drafted, you should go. And we had a good round table discussion with a whole bunch of people involved saying, wait a sec. He says he's not going. Everybody knows that's the deal. And, you know, you don't have to like it, but you can respect what Eric Lindros is doing. I'll fast forward a year. Bob Clark has now returned to the Philadelphia Flyers, and they're right in on Eric Lindros. And I asked Bob Clark, I said, Bob, last year at this time, you said that, you know, you thought a player should just go where he's drafted. And, you know, it really bothered you. It left I don't want to say a bad taste, but a bitter taste in your mouth. What's changed this year? And Bob Clark, in his typical fashion, because he's a great competitor, smiles and he goes, we're talking about Eric Lindros here. He goes, we have to try to get him, right? So, you know, like there's personal feelings. Oh, the player should go and everything. I know Rutger. I don't think there's for me, there'd be no personal flag. There'd be no red flags for me on Rucker McGroarty. I'd be trying to get him.
Okay. Got it. Clear. All right. So here we are, Wednesday, July 10th. All right. Now, I could just imagine Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, if this was October 10th, right? They go into the office as usual. They got their cup of coffee ready, and they have their list of things to do for the day. It's probably opening night. It's probably the day after a game. I have a pretty good feeling what happens in October, November, December, January, February, March, April. But what happens on July 10th? Can you paint the picture for us?
Sure, I can. You know, again, why don't we start on the macro level of the Montreal Canadiens?
Yeah.
So the macro level is that there's a plan in place. They're really patient and methodical in the plan. I've said this before, and you've heard me say this. The prospect cupboard is full. The shelves are stocked. And are all these players going to play for the Montreal Canadiens? No, they're not. That's just reality. So, you look at where your prospects are. So you're working with everybody who's ready. How long is the time frame when we think a player could come into our lineup? What does it mean for our lineup? So that's the macro thing on the individual player part of things. And you're always trying to project, and you're saying, okay, like I'll use Joshua Waugh. Okay, is Joshua Waugh ready for full-time duty? Is Joshua Waugh ready to come in and help our offense? Because the offense for the Montreal Canadiens was near the bottom of the league last year. So, the macro part of it is you want to improve your offense, you want to improve your defense, you want to improve your power play, you want to improve your penalty kill. So now on the macro level, you're looking at your prospects, where players are at, and then you're zeroing in. Okay, what does Joshua Waugh? Can Lane Hudson help our power play? Is he ready for full-time duty in the NHL? Then the other parts of this that are and now this is where the trades come in. You're trying to factor in maybe potential free agent signings. What do we have to do to improve? I have said this about the Montreal Canadiens multiple times. The Montreal Canadiens have worked really hard. They've been fully transparent in what they're doing. People ask me, can they challenge for a playoff spot next year? I've said no. They're not good enough yet. Okay. But what I would like to see them do is try to move into that 18 to 24 range of teams, and that's slotting somewhere. So to move up to in that area of the standings requires improvement. It requires improvement in your defensive and offensive overall play, your power play and penalty killing have to. So who can do that? And then you're trying to figure out, okay, without Kirby Dach, in my view, no question. A healthy Kirby Dach comes in, he's going to help the cause. You believe that with experience that young players are able to take more steps forward and be bigger contributors. And my great late friend Brad McCrimmon always used to say, you don't need 10% improvement. You need 2 to 3% improvement from all your players. If they can just improve 2 to 3% and you spread that across the board, that's how you move ahead by 10 points. That's how you move ahead by getting, more goals for and less goals against in all those areas. So that's where they're at. They're trying to form out, okay, what does our team look like? Remember, everybody's just watched and like what the Florida Panthers have done for a couple of years, what the Vegas Golden Knights have done, what the East looks like. So you're measuring yourself. What's it going to take for us to be competitive with those teams? Then you're also looking at, Tony, okay, Caden Gooley comes to mind. He can sign an extension now. We saw Slavkovsky sign an extension. What does Montreal feel is steps? Do they want it? Do they want to start engaging with Caden Gooley? Does his agent want to engage? Does his agent believe that he's capable of a bigger contract with a bigger year? These are all factors that you're dealing with, and the conversations between agent and team are back and forth constantly. You're trying to find a way to get some of your to not get some of your, but you're still exploring free agent options out there to try to fill specific areas of your team. That they don't need a number one center. No. I think Kirby Dach can play center. You're looking for specific areas of your team that you can fill out to allow you to improve. You're looking internally, you're looking externally. But that's every day you're looking at that depth chart. You're going, okay. And then you're getting a call from an agent. What about my player? You're going, okay, yeah, we'll talk to our group. These conversations are ongoing. It's not like you hit July 10th, you go, okay, let's all take 2 weeks off like the construction holiday in Quebec, and you will see at the beginning of August. That's not the way it works. This is constant. And, Kent will be making calls. Kent will be receiving calls, and you have to be ready to act. And when that is, whether it's a day from now, whether it's 21 days from now, everything points to what you just said. What do we want our team to look like on opening night? And that's the first thing you're looking towards with respect to how you're spending your summer days.
We talked about free agency, and of course, the Canadiens made it known, and so did Jonathan Marchessault, that there was interest there, and there was a discussion, and Marchessault, ends up signing a 5-year deal with Nashville, and the Canadiens weren't willing to offer more than 3 years. And I've mentioned that if I was the Canadiens, I wouldn't offer more than 3 years either, right? And so I think it all makes sense. there's a name.
I do too. Let me just, so Montreal looks at, they know Marchessault's a good player, and term becomes a question mark. Kelly McCrimmon said, we were ready to offer him 4. He came back and wanted 5. We said, we're not giving you 5. Those are hard decisions to make. Kelly McCrimmon and the Vegas Golden Knights know how good Marchessault is. The Montreal Canadiens know how good Marchessault is, and he would really help the offense. But when you start saddling yourself with contracts that, where there's going to be declining productivity and that cap hit's still going to be pretty significant on the and the term is longer, that's where teams run themselves into trouble. And Kelly McCrimmon said, I'm not doing it. Kent Hughes said, I'm not doing it. And the Nashville Predators are in a different place. They're in a different place. They said, we have to do this. But the reasons that Montreal expressed, the reasons that Vegas expressed, all legitimate. I don't think there was any lack of interest in Jonathan Marchessault, but at the right term and at the right price.
Yeah. So, the Canadiens could use scoring, right? I'm sure every team can. It's the hardest thing to do in the National Hockey League is score goals. And I brought up Daniel Sprong's name in the past here. And I said, look, he wouldn't obviously be choice number 1 or choice number 2 or choice number 3. And he doesn't check all the boxes. And he's not a full-time second line player. But he can, all depending on what identity you want to give your team, but he could probably be a bandit on the second line every now and then, probably end up on a third line, probably end up on a fourth line like he did in Detroit after they acquired Patrick Kane. But there's 3 names that are out there right now, right? That are still unsigned. Max Pacioretty, Tyler Johnson, and Daniel Sprong, who have showed that they can score goals and put up points at the National Hockey League level. I don't know this for a fact, but based on the injuries that Pacioretty's had, I think it would be very difficult for him to recover. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if he called it quits, but I don't know that for a fact. Tyler Johnson, I think the Canadiens are already on the small side, and I don't think they probably need his profile right now. But Daniel Sprong, would you not take a flyer, or would you suggest that don't sign a guy if you don't really love him?
No, I'm going to give you a couple of examples over time. So the first thing I'm going to say about Daniel Sprong, the Montreal Canadiens would like to get more offense, specifically help the power play, right? The power play was not very good, right? So Daniel Sprong can help the offense, and I think he can help the power play. So maybe what you look at Daniel Sprong as is as a specialist. Does he have to play on your second line? Maybe he just becomes a power play specialist. Maybe he becomes a player that slots up a little bit as an offensive player when you need offense, depending on what the situation of the game is. Pierre LaRouche was a 50-goal scorer when he came to the Montreal Canadiens. He was a specialist. Scotty Bowman scratched him when he didn't feel he could play in a certain type of game. He had him playing significant roles, significant moments in games when he thought that he could bring what Pierre did. J.F. Sauvé played for the Quebec Nordiques, and Michel Bergeron used him as a power play specialist to a great extent. And the power play in Quebec was great. The power play in Montreal was great with Pierre. I'm talking about specialists here.
Yeah, well, that's a name for the past. Jean-François Sauvé. I remember. Did he wear 15?
Yes,
I don't know if he wore 15, but he had the helmet, and he would play
he
would play the point on the power play. He was good.
He was a specialist, though.
Yeah, he was a specialist.
So Daniel Sprong to me is a specialist, but it's not like your power play's humming in the top 10. It's not like your offense is in the top 10. So if you looked at Daniel Sprong and said, here's how we're going to fit him in, and you say, Daniel, here's how we're going to use, there's going to be nights you might not be dressed. There's going to be nights you're on the fourth line, but we want to use you on the power play. We want to get our power play humming here a little bit. We want to improve it. We know there's moments in certain in games where we might need a little more of Daniel Sprong, and there might be games when we feel that the game isn't suited to your strengths. Just be up. But J.F. Sauvé, Michel Bergeron used J.F. Sauvé brilliantly, and Scotty Bowman used Pierre LaRouche brilliantly. And certainly, when Pierre might have been a little bit different because he was such an elite player and so skilled, but he was in Montreal, and what was he going to do? Complain about playing behind Mahovlich and Lemaire and then those guys? Like he had no standing. Well, I think he got traded. I think Peter Mahovlich got traded for Pierre LaRouche, so he wasn't going to play behind Peter. But when you start to think about like areas of your team you're trying to improve, sometimes it's not about all the boxes; it's about a specific box. And that's where I think Daniel Sprong can help you. Just understand what he brings and what area he can help you in, and then put him in that box.
Yeah.
Put him there and say, here's what you're going to do. I agree with you about Max. Max is an excellent shooter. He can score from 40 feet. Montreal Canadiens fans know what Max did and everything. Tyler Johnson had a good year last year in Chicago. I thought he played really well for the Chicago Blackhawks on a team that wasn't great. And even just his winning experience, and again, you might use him as a specialist.
Yeah.
Just say, we're going to use you as our power play guy. And this isn't a knock against Jake Evans, but you have Jake be the defensive part of things, and you have Tyler be the offensive part of things. And because you're not gonna ask Jake to come in and be on the power play. And I think that as you try to form your team in different areas, remember, you're trying to improve on like in certain incremental ways. And I think that certain players can do that. There's no perfect players out there, period. And there's certainly no perfect players out there now on the free agent market on July 10th, Tony.
A shout out to Betway. They're a leading global online betting and gaming brand. Follow your gut instinct. Go with Betway. Go on betway.com or scan the QR code to join the action. Must be 18 years old and play responsibly. We brought up Max Pacioretty. Could you imagine 2 times your Achilles tendon?
Yeah.
You're off for like 7-8 months, whatever it is. And then you try and come back, and then you snap it again within a couple of weeks, and then boom, it's all over again. And that really affects your ability just to walk. I mean, let alone skate. And the league has got so fast now. And if you don't get to those areas, because you can't get there, it makes it really tough. So look, I wouldn't be surprised if this is it for Max. As a matter of fact, somebody had said to me about a month ago, don't be surprised if Max calls it quits and he ends up joining the coaching staff of Michigan. And I said, wow, okay. That was a little bit of a surprise, but I think he has his summers in Montreal. I think he's got 5 kids, and he's had a very good career. Unfortunately, he was never able to win a Stanley Cup, which is too bad for a guy who had seasons of 39, 37, 35, 33, 30 goals. That's a pretty nice CV.
It's a pretty good pick by the Montreal Canadiens. And, he was interesting because Max played a year at Michigan before turning pro.
Yeah.
And really, he was one of those unique players that was ready physically and was ready to take on the challenges of pro hockey after 1 year at the University of Michigan. And he had a really good career. Max was a really good offensive player. And you're right. You're not just having an injury. Now you got to rehab the injury. Then you got to try to condition yourself to play in the best league on the planet. Not easy to do, and you got to do it twice.
Trevor Timmins, best year for drafting a scout of the Montreal Canadiens. Ryan McDonough at 12, Max Pacioretty at 22, and PK Subban at 43.
Yeah, well, we got a Norris Trophy winner. We got a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, a 30-plus goal scorer. You know how many teams would sign up for that? Just say, you know how many teams would sign up for 2 out of those 3?
Yeah.
Every team in the league would sign up. That was an excellent draft.
Marinaro talking to you about Accent Insurance Solutions. All insurance isn't created equal, and you know where to find the right solution for you. Accent Insurance. Accent doesn't sell insurance. They shop insurance for you to find the right product right on the money, whatever your insurance needs, home, automobile, or business. Call the Accent team at 363-3636 and get the right solution at the right price. Visit their website at Accent Insurance. Okay, so in ending, we talked about trying to go out to try and improve your team. Last question here. When you can't do it at the draft, are there other times of the year where the phone rings a little bit more for a general manager, with the exception, of course, of the draft and leading up to trade deadline week and trade deadline day? But does it die down in July? Does it die down in August? The phone still rings?
Oh, the phone still rings. If we go through the sequence, and I always start the sequence probably middle of January. Teams, and it might even start like you know where your team is at. You've watched your team for 3 months. You know where your team is at. You know what the strengths are. You know where the weaknesses are. You know what you'd like to do in terms of trying to add players. Your coaches are bothering you every single day that they need help in this area. And when I say bothering, that's healthy. That's not a negative. And so everything starts, like I would say, post New Year's. Call it the middle of January. And now you start to explore. Teams aren't ready necessarily to start to make trades or move players because they hold out hope. And that nothing wrong with that. But those conversations begin middle of January, and then they build. And then as you're moving towards the trade deadline, you're a team that's out of the playoffs or clearly out of the playoffs. You're getting lots of calls from the playoff teams. The playoff teams are making lots of calls. You're trying to make the playoffs. You're trying to figure out what can we get to give ourselves a push. But the seeds have been planted now after the deadline passes for further discussions to happen. Those lead into the draft. Now you have teams that have not gone as far in the playoffs as they thought. They've had disappointment in the playoffs. And so now there's more of an initiative to try to make changes, because you're kind of going, do we want to come back and be the same? That leads into the draft. I talked about how compressed the schedule is. So sometimes you just need to let it breathe. It's like letting dough rise. You can pull off the cloth and see if you just got to let it rise sometimes. And then you can start to bake the bread, but it's got to rise first. And I think it's the same thing with trades. Then what you got in free agency, what you didn't get in free agency, dictates the next steps. And the next steps are these calls. But this has been going on for a long. Like, it's not like it would. I'm not to say it's not going to happen, but it's rare where Kent Hughes would get a call from somebody completely out of blue and say, "Hey, are you interested in Mikko Rantanen?" Like, and I'm throwing it out there just for fun, right? And Kent, wow, where did that come from, right? Like, the conversations that have been going on, because again, contracts, new contracts, pending UFAs next summer. What you're going to do with your entry level contract players are all there. All these teams are trying to work through that. The calls, and again, you're trying to get your team ready for opening night, and just really start out the season. Reality is going to kick in November, but the calls are there, Tony. They're there and they're going on. And where you think you're closer, there's more time spent in those areas. But this idea that there's time off in the summer doesn't exist. It just doesn't. I may have told you this story.
Not even for us.
Yeah. Well, let me just be quick. I tell this story about the great Pierre Lacroix, and I use great because I think the world of Pierre Lacroix.
Hall of Famer.
And when he was with Colorado, he started with me in the beginning of February of 2002, talking about Derek Morris. We went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I was pretty clear on what I thought was value. He was pretty clear on what he thought was value. We finally got to September. It was, I don't know, we'd already played a couple of exhibition games. And he phoned me and he said, "Craig," he goes, "Okay." He goes, "You've been consistent. I've been consistent. Are you serious about what we were what you were saying?" I said, "Yeah." I said, I wouldn't have said it to you if I wasn't serious. He goes, "Okay." We had the deal done in 90 minutes. And that was Derek Morris, essentially, for Chris Drury and Stefan Yell. There was other parts that went and other pieces that went. But all in all, that's a 6-month dance. And I love dancing with Pierre.
Yeah, that's a good trade for you, by the way.
Yeah. Well, but it was and they were looking to add another defenseman. Derek was a really good player. I'm just saying, but that's how long it took. And we'd have lunch, we'd have dinner, I always said that Pierre was a bon vivant, and I loved him so much. And to me, that's something that's been talked about since February might not come to fruition till September. So you got to be aware of that. The talks never stopped.
I love the way this guy puts things in perspective. I'm talking about Craig Button, of course, and some of the analogies. Very unfortunately, though, I just can't stop thinking of dough rising right now and bread. And I'm going to have bread on my mind. I'm actually going to go for probably a piece, maybe even a loaf as we get off right now. Thanks so much for doing this. We'll talk to you soon, Craig. All right, there you have it, Marinaro. Special thanks to Energy Transportation Group, to Bittt, the Tibi, to Playground, to Betway, and to Accent Insurance Solutions. Thanks to all of you for watching. If you liked it, comment SICK, S-I-C-K. Share it with your friends. Tell them to follow us on YouTube if they haven't already. It's absolutely for free. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple. It's our way of feeling the love. For Shane Gaumont and Master Control, have a good night, everyone. I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaVie.tv, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.